Hampshire. Great to be here. So wonderful to see you. Thanks so much. Great introduction. Thank you. We're excited. I did my part. I brought the Florida sunshine for you. It's really nice. I didn't know I was anywhere else. We're excited to be here to say very clearly that our great American comeback starts by sending Joe Biden back to his basement in Delaware. Spends a lot of time as president on vacation. We might as well make it permanent, and so we're going to get that done. I like New Hampshire because, coming from Florida, we have no income tax, second lowest per capita tax burden in the country. When I go north, I usually go in the less hospitable tax climates, but you got this one little outpost in New England that's holding the line as the live free or die state. So thank you for that. And I just want to say, I know there's a lot that we can criticize President Biden for, and we will do it, but one of the things he deserves criticism for is, he's trying to abandon New Hampshire as the first in the nation state, and that is wrong. And he's doing that for his own political benefit without understanding, the role that a smaller state can play in this nomination process. And so I think what he's been doing with the Democrats is wrong, and I'm glad the Republicans are holding the line and are committed to New Hampshire. Our country is going in the wrong direction. I think we all see it. I think we feel it. Is anybody happy with having an open southern border where drugs are pouring in and killing millions of Americans? Is anybody happy with economic policies that are causing costs to rise and the value of our dollar to decline by almost 20% in the last 4 or 5 years alone? Is anybody happy that we have a presidential administration trying to kneecap our own ability to produce energy and be energy independent? Is anybody happy that we have a bureaucracy that is so detached from accountability that it's been weaponized against people it doesn't like? I mean, if Hunter were a Republican, he would have been in jail by now, and we all know that. Is anybody happy to see some of our formerly great American cities kneecapped by violent crime and see inmates running the asylum? Is anybody happy to see this woke mind virus infect all these institutions and try to impose that ideology on society and even on young kids? Are people happy that this federal government attempted to impose a biomedical security state on us under the auspices of COVID mitigation that did so much damage to people's livelihoods and freedoms and children's education? And of course, coming off this past weekend, we all should be upset that we lost 13 service members in Afghanistan due to the incompetence and dereliction of duty of President Joe Biden. Now, I think part of the reason we have these problems in this country is because we have an elite in Washington, D.C. that looks out for itself. And they put their interest over our interests as Americans, and they put their interest over our national interests as a country. 5 of the 7 wealthiest counties in the United States of America are suburbs of Washington, D.C. Now, how did that happen? I can tell you Washington, D.C. isn't producing much other than mountains of debt and loads of hot air, and yet there you have it, where you have all these people who are doing very well and living high on the hog. These elites, they don't want to enact an agenda to represent our interests. They want to enact an agenda that is imposed upon us from on high. And I think that's caused a lot of Americans to wonder, are you really going to get a fair shake? Is the American dream something that's still attainable? I'm living proof that the American dream works. I was born, in Florida. I was a blue-collar kid. My parents were working class. My mom was a nurse. My father worked for the Nielsen television ratings company. You actually had to put the rating boxes on the TV sets back then to get the ratings, and so that's what he did. My grandfather worked in the steel mills in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I was just, yeah, Pittsburgh, okay. You know, I was born in '78. That was kind of the tail end of the dynasty of the Steelers, and so even though I was born in Florida, there are baby pictures of me in Steelers regalia. I ended up becoming a Tampa Bay fan because that's where I grew up, and you know, just so you New Englanders know, we really appreciated using Tom Brady. That worked out very well for us. I know you guys had a heck of a run, but for us to get a Super Bowl with that, great, and he's as good as they come. But you know, I had blue collar upbringing. I was told you're not entitled to anything. You got to work for it. So I started working minimum wage jobs. My first job, full-time job, was I was just graduated high school. And you graduate high school, kids have fun over the summer. They do things before they go. Not me. I went and showed up. I was working for an electrical company as an electrician's assistant. So this is 5 days a week, 6 a.m., minimum wage. It actually taught me about government too, because the first day I showed up, you know, I'm in there, you know, like a flannel shirt, jeans, work boots, whatever. I show up and they look at me and they start looking at these work boots, and they sent me home. And I'm like, what did I do? Did I get fired on the first day? Like, no, we can't figure out whether your boots are approved by OSHA. I didn't know what OSHA was at the time, and then I figured out it's a federal agency. So I had to go buy OSHA-approved boots, which cost me as much as I made in that entire first week on the job. I don't know that it made me any safer, but it definitely made me a little bit poorer. So that was a lesson in life about when government's saying it's going to protect you, sometimes it's not necessarily doing that. But we did it, and we worked, and I used it, and then I'm in college, and I'm working. I mean, I was a baseball player. I'm doing all this stuff, working on studies, but always working these jobs when I could. And I only did that because I just believed in America. Hard work pays off. If you dig in and do it, you know, eventually doors will open for you. And I think that we need to make sure that spirit survives in this country. If you don't think that working hard is going to pay off, why would you do it? If I didn't believe in America, I may have made much different choices than I ended up making. So I'm running for president because I think American decline is not inevitable. It's a choice. And we have it within our power to choose a better path, a path that will lead to a revival of the American country and the American spirit. And that is exactly what we're going to do once we get elected. We need to do a number of things, yes? We have got to restore sanity in this country. And you see us off kilter in so many different ways. One of the ways we're off kilter is with fiscal and economic policy. You cannot simply print and borrow and spend money infinitum with no consequences. Of course, you're going to end up driving up prices like we've seen. You cannot kneecap your own ability to produce energy and think that that's going to help the average American family. And you know, they just did this debt deal in Washington, and what I can tell you is this is the truth. Our nation was careening towards bankruptcy prior to this debt deal, and our nation is still careening towards bankruptcy after this debt deal. To say that somehow this was a great thing when it's green lighting $4 trillion in new debt in the next 2 years alone, you know, it took almost 200 years in this country to develop $4 trillion in debt. And it keeps these inflated levels of spending in place that was elevated due to COVID. And then this IRS agents, remember they did 87,000 new IRS agents? It only reduces 2% of the IRS agents. So this is not a deal that is going to get us on a path to fiscal solvency. Look, in Florida, we run budget surpluses, okay? We spend money when it's needed. We have to deal with a lot of stuff. I've had to do a lot more in infrastructure. I've got all these people moving to Florida, and I got so many people visiting Florida. So we've got to take care of our people. We actually have exploding enrollment in schools because our schools were open, so families moved during COVID, all these things. So we do that, but we do it in a way that's responsible and sustainable. And in Florida, our economy is $1.2 trillion. We would be the 13th largest economy in the world if we were a separate country. And yet, with $1.2 trillion as an overall economy, our state debt is only $17 billion. That's the second lowest per capita in the United States. So let's have a dose of fiscal and economic sanity in this country. It will make a difference for the average American. The other thing we have to understand with respect to sanity is you can't have every institution in our country going on these ideological joyrides. You cannot have a situation where merit and achievement are trumped by things like identity politics. You should not have to compete in the woke Olympics just to get a job or just to get admitted to a school. And so in Florida, we said we're the state where woke goes to die, and we have made that a reality. We're going to do that with our We also need to work to restore a sense of normalcy throughout American communities. It is not normal to have millions of illegal aliens pouring in across the border, going into communities, and first of all, just the stress it takes on communities with schools and medical, criminal. You do have criminal aliens coming across, and you have so much drugs coming across that tens of thousands of Americans are being killed every year. We have a right to ensure the sovereignty of our country, and we must have a border that is actually meaningful. We also have to have communities where the inmates are not running the asylum, where prosecutors are not refusing to prosecute cases, and where people feel safe to be able to go about their daily lives. That is not true in many major cities in the United States right now, and the country's worse off as a result of it. We also have to restore integrity to our institutions, and as mentioned, I'm a veteran, Navy veteran, and in spite of me kind of coming from blue-collar roots, I worked hard to put myself in a position where I could be financially successful, and I had a lot of great opportunities to make a lot of money as a young man, and I had never made money before. But this was after September 11th, and I felt the duty to serve. Didn't get anything for it, didn't get my school paid for, just wanted to be able to do my part however I could in a time of conflict that the country had embarked on. And I look back on that, and I would have made so much more money doing so many other things, but the satisfaction that comes with being able to wear the cloth of your country, being able to serve alongside other patriots, that's a satisfaction money can't buy. And I'm proud of the service, and I'm proud of everybody who is wearing uniform. And we're proud of our veterans throughout all of history, particularly the veterans that are still with us today. We still have some World War II, of course not as many as we did, our Korean, Vietnam, and of course the more recent veterans from the Middle East conflicts. And I'm proud of their service, and I think almost all of them are proud. And yet, I have veterans coming up to me, and this never happened before, saying, Governor, I don't know if I'd want my kids or grandkids to serve in the military right now, given what's going on. Because I think this administration, and it didn't start with them, but they're putting it on steroids. They're politicizing the military. They're trying to inject ideology into it. They're taking the eye off the ball of mission accomplishment. They drove off great warriors by doing idiotic policies like a COVID shot mandate. You have Navy SEALs who had already had COVID. They didn't want to take the shot. They didn't need it. And so they're being told you either lose your career or you bend the knee. And so that drove off warriors. And so even at the height of the Iraq conflict, when I was over in Fallujah, we still had people that were wanting to sign up, knowing that if you sign up for the Marines or the Army, you're going to get sent to Iraq, most likely. And yet they wanted to do it because they believed in this country and they believed in the services. Well, now they have a tough time recruiting people. Why? People don't want to join a woke military. They want to join a military with integrity, a military that has its eye on the ball, and where you're pursuing a common mission that we can all be proud of. So we need to restore that in this country, and we will get to doing that very soon when we take office. We also have to restore integrity to our constitutional system. The Founding Fathers designed a system with 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, judicial. They did not design a 4th branch of government, an administrative bureaucracy that takes matters into its own hands. We now live in a country where some of the most important policy decisions are made not through your elected representatives, but by nameless, faceless bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. That is economic and social transformation without representation, and that is not the way the system is designed, and we need to get about the business of returning the government to its rightful owners, we, the American people. When you live in a crazy time, it's important to make sure that we're oriented on a strong foundation, and that foundation is truth. Truth must be our foundation. I don't have a separate truth than you. There's a truth, and we have to be locked in on reality and on facts and on the enduring principles that make this country great. Common sense can no longer be an uncommon virtue in this country. I was appalled what I saw during COVID going on in some of these places around the country. I mean, you literally have somebody running on a beach in California all by themselves, like nobody around, and you have police chasing them. And I'm just thinking to myself, what is going on with this country? So we need a dose of common sense. And I think the good news is if you look at some of the obstacles, there's a lot of problems, there's a lot of pessimism. But a place like Florida, we've shown that it can be done. Well, we chose facts over fear. We chose education over indoctrination. We chose law and order over rioting and disorder. Florida held the line when freedom itself hung in the balance. We were not going to let our state descend into some type of Faucian dystopia where people's livelihoods were destroyed and their freedoms were curtailed. No, we stood up to protect people's rights, to protect people's jobs, to protect their businesses, and to protect our kids' right to get an in-person education. And you know what? We were better off as a result of that. We chose freedom over Fauciism, and that was the right thing to do. What you find out is, you get elected to office, and they're all important, but when you're in an executive position, yeah, you got to be right on policy. I mean, obviously we see our president now is wrong on all these policies. It's hurting the country. You got to be right on the policy, but that's not enough. You got to exercise leadership. And if you're there and you can kind of think right about the policy, but you're not a leader, you're ultimately not going to be effective. And so during COVID, it fell to everybody in executive positions to make decisions about how you were going to handle this. And I can tell you in Florida, when we decided that we would chart our own course, that we would buck the elites, that we would buck the bureaucracy, the media, the left, even some Republicans, we faced a lot of blowback for that. We were getting hammered every day. They were going after us, and really they were trying to kneecap me for good. And I had a lot of supporters that were at the time just like, man, like, I know you feel strongly about this, but you're getting killed, and you're not going to be long for this world politically if you keep this up. You may want to reverse course. And at the end of the day, as a leader, you got to be willing to look in that mirror and be honest with yourself. Are you doing the right things for the right reasons, or are you not? And if you're curtailing what you think is right because you're worried about short-term political ramifications, that is not leadership. So I had to make the decision that, and the commitment, that I was going to care more about protecting the jobs of the people I represented than protecting my own. And if it didn't work out for me politically, so be it. That's the cost of leadership. You've got to do what's right, even in the face of intense criticism, even in the face of mountains of opposition, indeed, even if you have to stand all alone to do what's right. And so that's what we did. And you know what happens? Yeah, I was getting hit. It was a rough patch. But people see you digging in for them. They see that you're not going to back down and that they can count on you. And when they know you're willing to fight for them, man, they'll walk over broken glass barefoot to support you. And that's exactly what they did for me in the state of Florida. Leadership is also not entertainment. It's not about building a brand. It's not about virtue signaling. It is about producing results for the people that you represent. And in Florida, we have produced those results. We are the nation's fastest growing state. We lead the nation in net in-migration and have every year since I've been governor. We were just ranked #1 in education by U.S. News and World Report. We are #1 in education freedom. We are #1 in parental involvement in education. Our crime rate is at a 50-year low, and we have the second lowest tax and debt per capita anywhere in the United States. And so leadership matters, and we decided as governor that we would dig in and be an energetic executive and take on issues and go on offense and not just sit back like some potted plant and not want to get your hands dirty. Because every time you make a decision as a leader, some people like it, but some people don't. So the fewer decisions you make, in some respects, the fewer people you will end up alienating. But that's not what a leader does. The leader's got to do what they think is right and what the state or the country needs. So here's just some of the things we've been able to do in Florida, because I think it's important. Republicans always talk these great games. For my whole adult life, they've been talking, really since President Reagan, they've been saying they were going to do all these things. And how much of it ultimately comes to fruition? Not nearly as much as we need to. So in the state of Florida, we've signed legislation prohibiting the purchase of land by the CCP and other related entities. We have signed legislation kneecapping so-called ESG. No social credit scores, no ESG in pension, no vote banking to discriminate against conservatives. When Hurricane Ian hit Florida in September does anyone here have a place in Southwest Florida? We have, yeah, okay, pretty much. You realize Florida is kind of unique in our country when you start traveling around. And I remember I was in the middle of Wisconsin, a beautiful place, but I'm in the middle of Wisconsin. And I have a couple ladies come up to me, thank you for what you did during Ian and stuff. How do you know? We've got an apartment here, a condo there, so we've got great connections around the country. So Hurricane Ian is almost a Category 5, does massive damage, including knocking out a bridge going from the mainland to Pine Island, and then severing a causeway going to Sanibel Island in 3 different places. And so those were not state bridges. We didn't have control over them, and the local folks were telling the residents, it's going to be 6 months before we get things up and running, so you may want to make some accommodations. Well, these folks came to me because they're basically saying, look, if it's 6 months, our islands are going to die. So we need to get back going, and so can you help us? And I said, yeah, I'll help you. And look, a lot of people, elected officials, the minute you get involved in an issue, if it doesn't work out, you will get blamed for it. So a lot of people would just say, no, I'm not going to get involved. It's not a state road. Why, you guys figure it out. It's your baby. But no, leadership's about getting things done. So we said we'll take it. I brought my guys together. I said, listen, no bureaucracy, no red tape, and no excuses. I want these things back as soon as possible. So we took the job for Pine Island, and instead of taking 6 months, we rebuilt the bridge in 3 days, and then we did Sanibel 2 weeks after that. So now I have offered to President Joe Biden, because we have a big problem at the southern border, I will take my Florida crew and send them to build a wall. If we want to do it, I'll get that done. But the point of it is, we're a can-do executive. Don't take no for an answer. Figure out a way to get the job done. That's what we did there, and that's what we'll continue to do. Now, we don't have an income tax. I think you're the only state probably within 1,000 miles that doesn't have an income tax. And you're doing it right, and it's better. And I think, honestly, when Massachusetts raised tax, people just come here. And so you end up getting the revenue from their economic activity anyways. You're better off not having it, for sure. So we don't have an income tax. So we find out ways, how can we do tax relief in ways that will help families, particularly in an era of Biden inflation. And so we've enacted $2.7 billion in tax cuts just this year, including no sales tax on any item regarding raising a baby. Cribs, strollers, diapers, wipes, all those things is tax-free. We want to be family-friendly, and now families are going to save a lot of money. My wife and I, we now have a 6, a 5, and a 3-year-old, and so those are things that aren't necessarily in our wheelhouse anymore. But when I became governor, we had a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old. We didn't have our 3rd yet, and so my wife did remark to me after I signed the bill, why didn't you do this in 2019? And we would have said, well, it's because we didn't have Biden inflation in 2019. So, but we're happy to do that. We've also enacted universal school choice, so every parent has the right to send their kids to school. We inherited probably the most liberal state Supreme Court anywhere in the country at the Florida Supreme Court. 4 liberals, 3 conservatives. I've now been able to replace 3 of the liberals and appoint a total of 7 conservative justices. So instead of having the most liberal court in the country, we now have the most constitutionally conservative Supreme Court in the country. We've joined New Hampshire in fortifying Second Amendment rights by enacting constitutional carry legislation, and I commend New Hampshire and Vermont for standing for the Second Amendment. We've shown that we're tough on crime. We've done things like ensure that criminals are having to post bail, no get rid of bail. We're increasing penalties for fentanyl dealers, and we've now authorized the death penalty for pedophiles in the state of Florida. And we support the police, the people that wear the uniform that patrol our streets. We have their back. We don't defund law enforcement. In fact, we have done for 3 years in a row now, every sworn law enforcement officer and firefighter in the state of Florida has gotten a $1,000 bonus from the state of Florida because we appreciate the job they're doing. And we stand with that. And many other places. One of the reasons we have runaway crime is because we've seen the election of so-called progressive prosecutors, oftentimes funded with donations from people like George Soros, and they get into office and they say, we are not going to enforce certain laws because we don't like those laws. And so they give criminals a free pass. Crime starts to go through the roof. The communities get hollowed out. It's a total disaster. When we had one of those prosecutors in Florida that said he wasn't going to enforce laws in the state of Florida that he didn't like, I removed him from his post. He is gone. We've enacted strong policies to combat illegal immigration, including banning sanctuary cities, including sending our National Guard to help at the southern border, and even sending illegal aliens to beautiful Martha's Vineyard. We've signed legislation blocking the implementation of a central bank digital currency in the state of Florida. This is something to keep an eye on. They're going to try to get this banned. We'll stop it federally when I get in, but be very worried about that. And we're the first state in the country to eliminate so-called DEI from our public universities. This is something that they say it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's really just ideology that they're imposing on people, and not just the students, but even the professors. They have to take these loyalty oaths, which we got rid of in Florida. DEI, as it's actually practiced, is better categorized as discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public institutions. We've led the way on ensuring the integrity of our elections. We've banned ballot harvesting. We have voter ID, and we banned the use of Zuckerbucks in our state. And I think every state should follow suit on that. We are in Florida blocking any attempts by the Biden administration to impose this World Health Organization lockdown treaty on Floridians, and we will stop that for Americans as well. They want to institutionalize lockdowns as pandemic response, and we can never let that happen, and we won't. We've signed legislation ensuring medical freedom, no mandates for school children for COVID vax, no mandates for work, no vaccine passports, no mandates for mNRA or any experimental or emergency use vaccine, and we're the first state in the country to ban formally gain of function research, and that should have been done by the federal government long ago. We're also taking action to stem the opioid crisis. We do have very stiff penalties for these dealers, especially dealers who are targeting children. If they're lacing things like candy with fentanyl and marketing it to our kids, and they kill our kids, they need to be treated like the murderers that they are and spend the rest of their life in prison. We know we need to fight the supply, but that's not enough. We also need to fight the demand, and the First Lady has launched an initiative called Your Facts, Your Future, where we educate school kids about the dangers of illegal drug use. And not that you should ever use any of this stuff, but you could use an illegal drug that would typically not kill you, but if it's laced with fentanyl, you could die just based off that. And so the risks that these kids are taking by indulging in that is far, far higher than the risks of kids in the past generations. And so we're educating on that and helping to reduce the demand for experimenting with illegal drugs. And then finally, we're focused on people that are addicted to actually get them on a path to self-sufficiency. So we've started a coordinated opioid response network. We call it the CORE network. Instead of having somebody overdose, go in the hospital, and then just get put back right on the street with no help, because guess what? They will relapse if that happens. We have interventions where they're offered treatment, they're offered counseling, they're offered a way to be self-sufficient and to manage this addiction. Since this program's been in, our relapse rate is less than 10%, and that's something that's very difficult. Of all the things that we've done and gotten our teeth into, maybe the most important has been we've drawn a very clear line in the sand in the state of Florida, and we need to draw this across the country. The purpose of our school system is to educate kids. It's not to indoctrinate kids. And we've got to focus on what's right and it's important for me because, as governor, I understand how important education is to make sure our state's thriving. I understand how important it is for the country. But I also see these issues through the lens of a dad of a 6'5" and a 3-year-old. And I think when I was growing up, kids could go to school, they could watch cartoons, they could just be kids. You didn't have somebody always trying to impose an agenda and shove an agenda down their throats. Now we have this situation where people are really going after the kids. And I think that that's fundamentally wrong, and it's something that my wife and I have sympathy for other parents who are raising kids in this environment. So we have the responsibility to fight back against that and to make sure that we're protecting our children. And no one's done a better job of standing for kids in Florida. I want the First Lady of Florida to come up.
Speaking of kids, first of all, I'm honored to be here. It's my second time in New Hampshire, and I'm excited for a lot of reasons, one of which I get to talk to someone older than the age of 5, which is very refreshing. You might be wondering why my voice right now sounds a little hoarse. We had a big day yesterday, but the day before that, I was having a very long, in-depth conversation with a 3-year-old as to why it is not a good idea to write on the dining room table with permanent marker. It's a little bit like the hamster on the wheel, right? We keep going over it and over it. It's kind of like, and you guys get this, parents and grandparents, when you're trying to get in the car and you're trying to go somewhere and you have the 3-year-old who wants to do everything by herself, right? Because she has to buckle her seatbelt all by herself, as she says, I did it, right? So we're trying to do it, she won't do it. I'm like, Mamie, you cannot buckle your seatbelt into the cup holder. It doesn't work that way. No, I did it. So of course, a lot of times we're getting ready to go with the governor, we're getting ready to head out the door, you have this huge motorcade of folks getting ready to support and get on the road, and Mamie's back there for 25 minutes trying to buckle the seatbelt. So, but we're very blessed. That's one of the reasons why we fight so hard, is because we have a 6'5" and a 3-year-old, and we live in pure chaos in the governor's residence. By the way, for all of you folks out there, when your grandchildren or children want to play with slime, just say no. I can tell you though, if you move very quickly, you can get slime out of rugs. There's some very nice rugs in the governor's residence, which there are some marks that that are going to be there for the long term, but it's okay. Every governor that goes into the governor's residence, they always put their mark on it, right? They always add an addition, whether it's a sculpture or whatever, or library. Well, it's interesting for us. We have marks now in the dining room wallpaper, which is our mark that we're going to leave in perpetuity for our kids. But listen, so the governor was up here talking about all of the things that Florida hasn't accomplished, and here is why those accomplishments matter. Because too often, and you probably see it. You have people who run for elected office. They say they're going to do all these wonderful things, but when they go up to particularly places like Washington, D.C., they go rogue. They become listless vessels, bending in the wind, beholden to polls and politics, not delivering accomplishments on behalf of the people that they were elected to represent. And it's very frustrating because you see it. Again, it's that hamster in the wheel, again, like with the 3-year-old. But what the governor shows is that when he says he's going to do something, he gets it done. And that's why Florida has led on a host of issues. And so another thing that I'm very impressed about the better half is he's not afraid. I mean, if you haven't noticed, Florida's been in the spotlight a little bit about him getting attacked, particularly over COVID. It's funny, I'll turn on the TV every 5 minutes. It seems like someone's attacking the better half. As a matter of fact, sometimes I say to myself, if they're not attacking you, I wonder if you're doing the right things. But it seems like over and over that he's being attacked. But you know what? As I watch, and I feel like I have an obligation from watching in front of the cameras, behind the cameras, to say, you know, he never backs down. He never changes. He doesn't cower. He never takes the path of least resistance. He always stands up for what's right, and he always puts the interests of the people ahead of his own. And you saw that during COVID, and you saw it in spades, because he defended and protected the liberties and the rights, the livelihoods, and the happiness of the people. I remember we were hosting the Super Bowl, and you had people coming all over from the United States to come to Florida, to Tampa. And there were literally tears in people's eyes because it was the first time that they were able to go out and have dinner with their family. Who is government to tell you that you can't do that with your friends and your family? And I'm so proud of the stance that he took, and he did it for the right reasons. And so at the end of the day, I'm excited to be here because we need to protect and defend the idea of America. We need to ensure that our children, our 6, 5, and 3-year-old, your children, your grandchildren have the opportunity in America to live up to their God-given potential. And we need to show the world, with this guy as the next president of the United States, that the best days in America are yet to come, and I know we're going to get it done. So God bless
The First Lady, when we did the governor re-election, she started a movement called Mamas for DeSantis. And since it's Florida, we also included the grandmas, and that was important. But the goal was to sign up 1 million moms, and she ended up signing up 1.1 million moms and grandmas to join the effort and really focus on these core issues that really matter for the protection of our kids. Look, parents have a fundamental right to direct the education and upbringing of their kids. And that should be true in every state in this country. It is true in Florida. Part of what that means in terms of parents' rights is having the right to know what curriculum is being used in your kids' classrooms. So we've enacted transparency legislation where parents can go in, and if there's something that is age inappropriate or something that violates Florida standards, they can blow the whistle. And so parents have done that. Now, what some in the media try to say is that if you have a pornographic book in like a 5th grade classroom that a parent objects to and it's removed, that's equivalent to, quote, banning the book. That's not a banning of book. You have to make a decision about how you curate books in a library or a classroom. You could have one book on George Washington. There's 100 other books that are not in there. You're not banning those other 100. You're just making a decision what's appropriate to be in the classroom. And so it's a total fraud when they say that. But what we did is we decided to do a press conference, and we called it Exposing the Book Ban Hoax, because it is a hoax. Yeah. But before the parents came up and talked and told their story, we just played the video and just showed what it was the parents were actually objecting to. The local news stations had to cut their feed from the press conference because they said it was too graphic. Well, if it's too graphic for the 6 o'clock news, how is it okay for a 6-year-old school child or a 10-year-old school child? We're also not going to allow our schools to be used for ideological indoctrination, and that's why in Florida we've eliminated critical race theory from our K through 12 schools. We're not teaching kids to hate our country or to hate each other with your tax dollars. No, instead, we're putting a renewed emphasis on American civics, on teaching about the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, on teaching kids what it means to be an American. teaching them why so many people have sacrificed, fought, and even died for this country. Because you know what? It doesn't matter what course of vocation, education our students pursue. When they graduated of our K-12 school system, all of them will be required or called upon to discharge the duties of being an American citizen. And we have a responsibility to ensure they're going to exercise those duties with an adequate foundation to know what makes our country unique and what principles the country was founded on. So we're doing that in a big way. That's what you call a positive vision for education, and a vision that I think is going to make a very positive difference in our state and hopefully in our country. We also have drawn a very clear line in the sand. Things like transgender ideology has no place in our schools. It is wrong to teach a student that they may have been born in the wrong body or that their gender is a choice. Parents should have the right to send their kids to school and know that the school is going to be focusing on core academic subjects and not getting involved in all these other. So we made that clear in Florida. Now, the parents in Florida were thrilled because they don't want to see the schools careen off in that direction. Let's just focus on the basics. The parents were thrilled. Now, the left was not happy with that. The media was not happy with that. And we even had a company in Florida that some of you may have heard of called Disney that wasn't happy with that. And, the way it works in Florida is like they typically call the shots, or had at least until I was governor, they'd call the shots. So they wanted to deep six the parents' rights legislation. And people told me, Disney weighs in, that's going to be a big problem. I don't know if you're going to be able to withstand that. Well, here I stand. I'm not backing down 1 inch. And I've seen some of the Republicans have taken the side of Disney and have criticized me for standing up. But at the end of the day, we stand for the protection of our children. We stand against anybody who would seek to rob them of their innocence. And on those principles, there simply will be no compromise. We will stand strong in defense of the children of our state and of our country. It's also sad, it's important. It's also sad that we even have to talk about some of these things. We signed legislation protecting the integrity of women's athletics. It's wrong to compete on the men's swim team for 3 years, then switch to the women's team, and then win the women's national championship. That is not right. That's taking away opportunities from girls and women athletes. And as a father of 2 daughters, I'm sensitive to that because I just want these girls to be able to compete with fairness and with integrity. Why would we let someone rob them of those opportunities? And so in Florida, we don't allow that to happen. And it's sad that we're even having to discuss this because I think this is really horrific. But we put the kibosh on these doctors doing sex change operations on these kids. It is mutilation, and it is wrong. And now they're going to lose their medical license and go to jail in Florida if they do that. So Florida, we deliver. We show it can be done, and not just in terms of the results from policy, but also how that plays electorally. I got elected to what was then considered the nation's most closely divided swing state in 2018. When I got elected by less than 1% of the vote, people told me, it's a very closely divided state, very delicate political balance. You may want to go into office and kind of keep your head down and don't rock the boat. Because if you do anything, you can tip that balance against you and maybe we don't win next time. And I understood that advice, but of course I rejected that advice and we went in and we were bold and we delivered. And so fast forward 4 years later, we didn't win by 32,000 votes, less than 1%. We won by over 1.5 million votes, almost 20% margin, the greatest election performance for a Republican governor candidate in the history of the state of Florida. And we not only won Republicans by a record margin, which of course is important, we won independents by 18% of the vote. We won over 60% of Hispanic voters. You look at rural areas, we were winning ungodly margins, like 85, 90, 92% in rural Florida. I used to think like they get 92% in Philadelphia. I'm like, that's fraud. How can you get 92? I was getting it, and it was not fraud, so it was good. So we did massive in rural, swept all the suburbs, but then even in our urban areas like Miami-Dade County, our largest county, 2.8 million people, Hillary Clinton had won it by 30 points in 2016 in the presidential election. We not only won Miami-Dade County, we won it by double digits. And so that's showing you really what we need to do. You can't win with just Republicans. You need to be able to win independents. You need to be able to go into areas that we've typically written off, and we competed up and down the state, and we're able to turn in a victory for the ages. The other thing I think Florida shows, and it's something that the First Lady pointed out, is, and this is something even my biggest political opponents in Florida would acknowledge. If the governor says he's going to do something, then you can take that to the bank. He is going to do it. He does not do this idly. He doesn't say things flippantly. There may be things you ask me about that I'm maybe sympathetic to, but I'm not sure that I have a path to do it. So I'm not going to just give you an empty promise. I mean, when I say we'll do it, you can take it to the bank, and I think that's very important. So as president, you know, I'm going to be a very energetic executive. We're going to take issues head on. We're going on offense starting on day one. We are going to reverse Biden's disastrous economic policies. We're going to be focusing on making sure Americans can enjoy a decent standard of living. We're going to be making sure that the federal government stops spending us into oblivion. And we're going to focus our economy not on these big corporations, but on small business. Those are the businesses that ultimately are going to cause our country to prosper. And we've got to stop selling out to the Chinese Communist Party. I want to make more things here in this country, not have China make everything. As a Republican, I've listened to Republicans my entire adult lifetime talk about the southern border and illegal immigration, and yet here we are continuing to see it as a problem. I will be the president that brings this issue to a conclusion. We will shut the border down. We will build a border wall. We will end mass migration into this country, and we will hold the Mexican drug cartels accountable for the carnage they have inflicted on the American people. We will usher in a reckoning about the federal government's disastrous COVID policies, which hurt people. It's important to do that. It's important to bring accountability for those disastrous lockdown and mandate policies, because if we don't have accountability, they will be able to get away with it again. And we need to make sure that never again in this country will we allow the country to be locked down the way it was during COVID. We will go into office recognizing that this woke mind virus represents a war on the truth. And so we must wage a war on woke. We will fight the woke in the schools. We will fight the woke in the corporations. We will fight the woke in the halls of Congress. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. We've made the state of Florida the place where woke goes to die. As president, we're going to leave woke in the dustbin of history where it belongs. Day one, as Commander-in-Chief, we will revitalize our armed forces. All the politics will be out on day one. We will have accountability and merit be the order of the day, and we will see a resurgence in interest of people wanting to join the military because they know it will yet once again be something that's meaningful and special. And we need to have a strong military if we're going to be able to project power and ensure peace throughout the world. We cannot allow the Chinese Communist Party to win the 21st century. They are a threat. They are our number one threat. The U.S. has empowered them with bad policies for a generation. They've built up their manufacturing. They're building up their military. A weak America means we will end up having a Chinese 21st century, and we cannot let that happen, and we will get to work on that on day one. We will also go about the business of reconstitutionalizing the federal government. We cannot have an unaccountable, weaponized administrative state that imposes its will on us, even against our consent. And there's a lot that goes into that, but I can tell you, we will clean house. You will have on day one a new FBI director. You will have an attorney general that has a backbone that's going to get in there and do what needs to be done. And here's the thing, as president, you've got to be disciplined, you've got to be focused, because this is a massive amount of power that's accumulated in these unaccountable agencies. They are not going to give that up willingly. This is going to be in the trenches day after day, and you got to have the right frame of mind to be able to win those fights. I think that you got to look at it. There's going to be lawsuits, there's going to be this, there's going to be that. You got to be willing to pull the trigger. You got to be willing to use your authority. I think you really need to ensure that we have a two-term president to be able to see this to a conclusion. I mean, you do one term and they reverse it when they come in. You can't have it be reversed. We can't let the bureaucracy just wait us out. We got to make sure all these changes stick and so that they're permanent. And here's the thing: at the end of the day, what we have in terms of this unaccountable fourth branch of government, that calls into question the viability of constitutional government itself. And so if we forfeit this opportunity to finally bring this administrative state to account, then we will be forfeiting a great legacy that our founding fathers bequeathed to us. So I can tell you, populations throughout history would give an arm and a leg to be able to live under a constitutional system based on the rule of law. So let's recapture that and let's preserve it for the next generation. The other thing you have to understand, I think, as president is, you got to have humility. You can't be prideful. It can't be just about you. Yes, you're the leader, but you need to have the humility to know that you can't do it alone. You need a cadre of people that are surrounding you, that are serving in the administration, who share the vision and who are going to put the mission ahead of whatever their personal interests may be. And you can't do that if you just recycle everybody from inside the Beltway. You need to bring people from outside of Washington, D.C. We're going to be calling on people to uproot their family for 2, 4, 6 years, to serve in these positions. And this is thousands